Hey, it's Tim here, and in today's video, I'm here to talk about a feature that's been part of the Tableau setup for a long while. That is the Show Me feature in Tableau. I've actually got Tableau open here, and if I just bring out my annotation tools, the Show Me feature lives here on the top right-hand side of the screen. Now, this has been part of Tableau for a long while, but I actually think a lot of people don't use this correctly. So what I'd like to do in this video is show you, one, how to use it, two, how I think you should be using it, and then three, show you some examples with some charts. Okay, let's get stuck in. Okay, so let me show you how Show Me works. What I've done is I've just reset Tableau completely so you can see how I got to Show Me. I'm just going to connect to Superstore Sales here by clicking on this sample EU Superstore dataset on the left hand side. That brings us to this interface here, and over here on the top right hand side you can see the Show Me feature is right there. Now Show Me is quite a cool feature. It's actually been in Tableau for a while. In fact, Tableau thinks it's so important they've even trademarked it. So I'm going to show you how it works. Essentially, you can actually undock Show Me. A lot of people don't know this. If I just drag this, you can see that it leaves the top right hand corner and can float it around. This is because it's meant to help you in your analysis, so you can actually put it where it makes the most sense. So for this, I'm actually going to move it over here on the left hand side. I'm just going to move it underneath the marks pane, and then I'm going to create more space by dragging this out to the right hand side, so it's almost part of this little left hand side pane. I'd love to be able to dock it down here, but unfortunately we can't do that. So how does Show Me work? Well, if I hover over one of these charts, you'll see that it gives you a clue right here at the bottom. You can see that it says for highlight tables, try one dimension and one measure. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's try one dimension segment, and I'm going to hold Command or Control on the Windows and then select Sales. And you can see that when I select those two things whilst holding Control or Command, a bunch of the charts light up. And so what's going on here is it's telling you what's possible with these two data sets. So if I go ahead now and click on this highlight table, it will actually build out the highlight table for you. Notice what happens. It brings some items here onto the marks pane, onto the columns and rows, and then obviously we have this legend that turns up. So it's actually doing quite a lot of work for you. Now, what we can also do is, now that we have data on the chart, you can also change it. So let's say that I click on this other heat map over here. This is a horizontal bars chart. I don't think that's actually right. This is more of a sort of like a shaped heat map of sorts. This is just a standard table. And as you can see, it's building these sort of charts on the fly. And every single time something's changing in the marks, columns, rows, the legend is always changing. And if you go down to something even more complex like a box plot, you can see that there's actually not much information there. There's only segment and sales, and somehow that's ended up with a box plot, but we're using a circle chart type. And so my real challenge to a lot of people is actually, when you're using Show Me, do you really understand what's going on? Do you really actually understand what's going on under the hood? The feature is called Show Me for a reason. It's supposed to show you how to build these charts. But if you don't take the time to actually look at how it's doing that, then you're not going to get the value from learning how to use this feature. So that's essentially what I want to try and do. I'm going to show you where to pay attention when you're using Show Me so you can see what's happening. And then at the end, I'm going to show you how to do that in practice with 4 charts. Okay, so let's clear the sheet and let's start again and really understand what's going on. I'm just going to close the Show Me pane here on the left, and I'm just going to hit this option here at the top to clear the sheet. And that means we've reset the view, we've got nothing in there, and we're ready to go again. Okay, so for this one, what I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to select Order Date. I'm going to hold Command on the Mac, Control on the Windows, and Sales. And when we do those, you'll see those two are highlighted. Then I'm going to go to the top right hand side, select Show Me. This time I'm not going to undock it. I'm going to leave it on the top right because I'd like to leave some space here on the visualization so I can show you a few things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose a tree map this time. Okay, I'm going to choose this chart type over here. So let's hit select, and Tableau will build that automatically. Now, this is a very nice, simple chart, and I've chosen it deliberately because it makes it very easy for us to look at certain things. Okay, essentially, when you're using the Show Me feature, you need to pay attention to certain areas. So let me just go ahead and close this. And I'm just going to highlight on the screen where you should be paying attention. I'm going to use the blue highlighter here. So the first place you should be paying attention is the columns and rows section here on the top right hand side. This is important because essentially anything that goes in here pretty much tends to control either an axis or a specific side of the chart, whether it's a header, column, rows. All of that is controlled here at the top right hand side. The next most important part to focus on is the marks pane over here. Now the marks pane is important because ultimately this actually controls the chart type, it controls labels, it controls color, It even controls granularity on our chart. So it's a really, really important place to look. And then the last place to look is actually something slightly sort of unintuitive. It's sort of abstract. Color is actually a really important thing to look for. And the reason I say that is that because in essence, sometimes color gives you a clue that something else is going on, okay? And it's maybe not so apparent here on the chart. In this chart type, it's obvious that the color pane over here on the left-hand side is what's controlling the tree map. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight a really bizarre part of this chart. I'm actually going to highlight this orange. You need to pay attention to what's on the axis. Now, this chart doesn't have an axis, but let's just say we're going to highlight this section over here. And if we had an axis, we'd be looking in this space over here. So we're essentially looking in these 4 areas to understand what's going on. Okay, so columns, rows, the marks pane, and then any axis or any headers or any columns and rows that are going on. Okay, I'm going to clear this. Now that I've shown you this, I'm going to clear this view. And we're going to go through a few charts just to see what's changing each time. So let me go ahead and clear the annotations and let's hop into some charts. Okay, to do that, I'm going to go ahead and clear this chart again. This time I'm going to select order date and I'm going to select quantity, just 2 slightly different measures. Then I'm going to undock Show Me and I'm going to bring it right here so we can sort of swap between them very, very quickly and pay attention to what's changing. I'm going to sort of move it down as far as I can off screen. And the key thing to notice is that the charts that are colored here in the Show Me section are actually what are viable with the 2 things I've selected. Okay, so that's really important to be aware of. Let's start with the first one. Let's select a table. Okay, quantity and order date. When we select a table, Tableau takes the order date. It specifically picks the year of that order date and places it along the top. So this is what I was saying earlier on. The order date here is in the columns shelf. So now it's creating columns, okay? And then what it's doing with the quantity, if we want to build a table, it's essentially taking the quantity and it's putting it on this text mark over here. So if we wanted to build this ourselves, we'd essentially do this. Let's clear the sheet, drag order date, put it on columns, then drag quantity and put it on text. And it builds exactly the same chart, okay? Now notice, because we've built this chart, Tableau is now showing me that I can build other charts with this. So Show Me also works when you've already got something on the canvas. Let's go to the next chart, which is this one here. This is a highlight table. Let's go ahead and select that and see what changes this time around. Now, when we change it this time around, something else happens. So we see that the quantity field appears twice, once on color and once on text. The mark type changed to a square. This is a very subtle change. If I just go back, you notice before it was an automatic with a text label. And then if I go forward, it's now a square, not automatic, square. And then what you now see is that there's some color here on the visualization, which is hinted by the fact that quantity is also on color on the detail pane. So how do we build this? Let me show you how this works. So let's go ahead and clear this. If we remember the things we just talked about, so order date was on color, and then we had quantity, okay, which was on text. That's what we'd already figured out how to do before. But notice this time it's on automatic, okay? Let's go ahead and change that to square. And now to bring quantity onto color again, you just need to hold Control or Command on Windows and just drag that on. What that does is it duplicates it, and essentially we get exactly the same table again. So now you can start to see how Show Me works, how you should really be using Show Me. You should be using it as an assistive tool to show you how to build charts in Tableau. Okay, now let's turn it up a bit. Let's try some more complex chart types. Let's go to a pie chart. Okay, I'm going to select the pie chart here just by clicking Show Me again. And you'll notice a lot of things changed. In fact, we have nothing on columns and rows. Everything is going on over here in the marks pane. So this is one of those sort of bizarre changes where everything happens in one place. But if you actually try and build this yourself, you might actually not sort of intuitively find where all the features are. So let's look at this. We've got year on color, which is sort of bizarre, but if we look at our legend, that makes most sense. We've got quantity, which happens to present the angle of each section, which also makes sense. And then you've got the sum of quantity again, which is also controlling the size. So this is almost the sort of total size of each element. So it's a little bit weird because let's see what happens if I remove this quantity. Essentially nothing happens. So it's essentially taken that duplicate quantity item and it's used it to size something. But you got to remember, Show Me is working working with what you've given it. And sometimes what you've given it isn't necessary. So it will still find a way of putting that somewhere. So if I remove this, notice nothing really changes. But if I put it back, we get this legend, which is actually controlling the total size of the entire visualization at 37,773, the total number of items that we've got. I know this because if I go put this over here on the right hand side, I also have the sum here on the bottom, which is 37,773. Okay, let me move the show me back to where it belongs and let me size the marks pane a little bit better so we can see what's going on. Okay, now how do we build this ourselves? Well, let's try and recreate it. Let's pay attention to where the items are on each shelf: year, quantity, and pie chart. Okay, let's clear the sheet and try and build this ourselves. So first of all, I'm going to bring the year, and the year was on color, but I'm actually going to do something different. I'm actually going to put it on detail in this particular case, just to sort of give us a little bit of context. So you can see that I've got the different years. If I hover over it, you can see them very, very clearly. The next thing I need to do is to change this to a pie chart. So I'm going to go down to this marks pane and I'm going to select pie. You can see that that's this option here. And when we do that, everything turns into a circle. Essentially, each year is now taking up a quadrant. And the reason that's happening is because it doesn't know how to split up these years. So of course, if we go and grab quantity and we put that on the angle, it now understands how to split these up. You can see that this is 2019, it's quite a large chunk. This is 2018, slightly smaller chunk. 2017, again, slightly smaller, and 2020, the largest chunk available, okay? But the difficult thing here is we can't see how these items are different because they're all sharing the same color, blue, and there's nothing to separate each of the sections. So let's go ahead and change one thing on this chart. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this 3-dot item, and you'll see that I actually get this pane that shows me all the different mark types that I can choose. You don't have to just drag things, you can actually change them on the fly. And now I'm going to change this to color, okay? And you immediately see that now this looks more like a pie chart, okay? And this is great because now I'm pretty much where I was before, except for one thing is missing. I can't see the percentages around this. You see, when I click on this, notice that it adds this back in. It really wants to put this on size. It's totally not necessary. What is actually more useful is a label to show me all the different percentages. So how would that work? Well, if you do a bit of Googling, you'll find out there's some things called table calculations, which can do things like percentages of total. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab quantity again, and I'm going to put it on detail. And the reason I've put it on detail is because I don't want it to interfere with my chart. You see, when you put a measure on detail, it doesn't sort of change the way your chart works, if that makes sense. Whereas if I put it anywhere else, it's actually going to affect something on the chart. So I'm going to go here into this little drop down. It's a very, very tiny drop down. We're going to go down to quick table calculation, and then we're going to choose percentage of total. Okay. And the way Tableau looks at this, it looks at this and says, hey, the only thing partitioning this data is the year. And so if you ask me to calculate the percentage of total, the context is the year. And so I'll calculate where, 2017 as a percentage of the whole, set of data, which is the whole set of data, 2017 to 2020. And so if I now drag that onto label, now that we've done that, you'll see the percentages come up. I could have also just done what I showed you previously, which is just click on these 3 dots, select label, and now we have our pie chart. And we're pretty much good to go. So that's how to do a pie chart without using the show me function. And you see, if you use the show me function once and then you learn how to do it straight away, you actually have more control, because what I know would have happened is if you kept on using the show me function, you'd have never figured out how to use the labels to actually label this pie chart. Again, if I go back and click on the pie chart, it gets rid of the label and it thinks the size is the most important thing to highlight. So it's doing this for a reason, obviously, but the thing we want is actually this, something with labels. Okay, now pie charts, okay, we're not a fan of them in DataViz, but if you're learning how to use Tableau, it's going to be something you're going to try and build, because guess what, you can do it in Excel. And so it's important to understand how to do it. Okay, now we're going to turn the heat up a little bit, and we're going to choose a box plot, because this is a slightly different chart. Now, if we click on it, you'll notice quite a lot happens. Let me move the show me over back here to the right hand side. Now, a lot happened here, and it's sort of confusing, because what it did is it took what was on the chart already and it used it. So if we go back one step, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the percentage of total from the labels, and then we're going to click it again to see what happens. And you see now we just get one box plot. Tableau Show Me will always try and use everything on the visualization when you click on it. So just be aware of that, okay? And now you see a box plot, but notice what's going on here. We're looking at the rows and we've only got one item here. And we're looking at the detail over here on the marks pane, and we've only got the year there. Yet this is somehow a circle chart type, and we have a box plot. So what's going on here? Well, remember earlier on I showed you 4 places you should be looking to understand what's going on with Show Me. So let me highlight those again. The first place was obviously up here, columns and rows. The next place was the marks pane, but remember the other place I showed you to look was along the axis over here and over here. So in this case, we have the axis of quantity on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and understand what's going on there. If I right click on that and actually go and edit the reference line, this pops up, okay? And you'll notice that it goes straight to the box plot option. So you wouldn't have known to go into this menu if you'd been using Show Me all along, because if this is the only way you know how to do it, you would never have thought to sort of go in here. Now, if you'd Googled it, you'd have found it. But fundamentally, if you're trying to learn Tableau, well, you need to understand what's going on. So if you look in the axis in this case, you'll find the box plot. And here we are. It's essentially showing data that's within 1.5 times of the interquartile range. And because we've only got the different years, it's just basically generating a very simple spread. So let's choose some slightly more interesting items and then recreate this. Then we're going to rebuild this so you can see how that works. So let's go ahead and clear this. I'm going to go ahead and clear the chart. And this time, what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to select country. Country is a useful one because you can get sort of multiple items in there. And then I'm also going to select, I'm probably going to select the segment as well. And then I'm going to select the quantity, okay? And you'll see I've selected 3 things, and now the Show Me pane has lit up and box plot is still available. So let's go ahead and select that. And now we get a slightly more meaningful box plot, okay? Now I wish that I sort of flipped it the other way, but that's fine. It's using the segments to separate things and then the different countries as a way of sort of figuring out what's going on. Now, in this chart type, you're probably looking at it and go, right, so how do I build this? You've got something on detail, okay, that's what this icon means. Columns on segment, quantity on rows, and then everything else is happening inside of the axis, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and build this. Let's drag segment onto columns and then quantity onto rows. That gives us a very simple bar chart, okay? And the next thing we need to do is to put the country on detail. And when we do that, it looks like this. Now that's not what we saw before. And that's because the chart type is on automatic. So Show Me won't tell you how automatic changes. You need to sort of get to grips with that and understand that yourself. And so here we need to actually go and manually change this from automatic to circle. And when we get circle, we start to get that spread that we're seeing in the box plot. The other thing is that these circles are huge. In the box plot, they were tiny. So how do we change that? Well, we go ahead here and change the size and we sort of dial it back down. And now that looks a little bit more representative. And so we're actually done with this chart. The only other thing we need to do is go and enable the box plot itself. So let's right click on the axis, add a reference line actually, because it's not there, we can't edit it. And you want to go to this option right here on the end called box plot. And when we do that, you can see that the box plot actually activates in the background. And now we've rebuilt that chart, okay? So now you can see how this works. This is a very, very powerful thing to understand. Once you start using Show Me properly, it actually forces you to ask some tough questions about why Tableau is doing certain things and where it's doing those things. And once you understand that, honest to God, you will never need to use Show Me ever again. In fact, when I'm training people with Tableau, I let them use Show Me initially, but I always say, look, by the end of this course, if you don't understand how to build a chart and you're still using Show Me, this course has not been a great course. Okay, so try and get away from using Show Me as much as possible. Try and understand why things are happening, and trust me, you'll gain much better control of what's going on. Instead of just clicking things around, you'll actually fully understand what's going on and you'll start to give yourself a challenge. Now, the other mark type that's worth just touching on very briefly is maps, because this can sort of be confusing because Tableau has some really powerful mapping capabilities and it's not always apparent in sort of the interface. So let me clear this sheet. This time I'm going to select country and I'm going to select sales. Okay. I didn't hold command there, so let me try again with country, and now you'll see that that sort of comes up, and you'll see that I get two versions of mapping. I can either map using symbols or I can map using a filled map. I'll use a filled map, and when I click on that, you'll see that it goes ahead and it thinks about it, and then it generates a map. Now I'm using the European dataset, you might be using the American dataset, that's absolutely fine. Now what you'll notice here, although I selected country and sales, okay, actually what ended up happening is that country got put into detail here on the left, sales got put on color, but then we had longitude and latitude generated, sort of brought in. And this is the thing about mapping. Tableau has an internal mapping database, and from that it generates latitudes and longitudes, and then it uses that information to do filled maps. And so that's what's actually going on here. If I wanted to do this in Tableau myself, I'd have to just think about it a little second, okay? Because if I go back and I try and recreate that exactly as we just saw, all that would happen is country would go on detail, okay? Sales would go on color, and notice that when I did that, it brought latitude and longitude on it for me, okay? So it didn't actually sort of, give me an option. Would you like me to draw a map? Or it didn't sort of just draw like countries as a square. If I do exactly the same thing with any other dimension, for example, segment on detail, and then quantity on color, it doesn't do the same thing. It draws a basic tree map. So this automatic mark type is doing a lot of heavy lifting for us, okay? When I drag a geographical field into the view, it assumes that the thing I want to see is a filled map when I put it on detail, and that's what actually generates this map, okay? You see here, it's a symbol chart. As soon as I put sales or quantity on color, it changes to a filled map, okay? So if I just go back one step, circle chart, put sales on color, filled map, okay? And you need to understand this, because if you just go straight to a show me option, you're going to miss those steps in between. So I think I've hammered the point home. If you haven't got it by now, try and not to use show me as a way of building charts. Try and use it as a learning tool, okay? Think of Microsoft Clippy, but without the sort of cheesy Clippy face, and it's inside of Tableau Desktop. That's how you should really be using this. Once you figure out how to do something, you no longer need to do it. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so I hope that's really helped people. I hope that's really helped people understand how Show Me should be used. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you haven't, well, hit the dislike button twice, give me some feedback on this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.